thinking a little bigger than most people do initially. And I think the biggest I guess reason behind that, right, is when you're raising significant capital, if you're going to raise it, from a private perspective, each investor that you work with is going to be a series of conversations, and some are going to be many conversations, some might be a couple, but it's going to be a series of conversations. And that obviously takes up time. And the one thing that is limited by all of us, right, on Earth right now is there's only so much time in a day. You can't make a 24-day into a 26-hour day. We all need to still sleep, and so making sure that you align your goals with the level of investor and your minimum capital placement, et cetera, is very key to making sure you can hit your goals. Because if you go in with the mindset of, I'll take investors at $1 or $10. Yeah, you can get a lot of investors, but it's going to take a lot of conversations to get any traction on that front.
If you're a real estate investor and are wondering how to raise and leverage private money to make more profit on every deal, then you're in the right place. On Raising Private Money, we'll speak with new and seasoned investors to dissect their deals and extract the best tips and strategies to help you get the money, because the money comes first. Now here's your host, Jay Conner.
Now let me ask you something. What would your business look like if you had access to $35 million in private money? Well, most people struggle to raise even their first $100,000. My guest today here on the show didn't just figure it out. He built an entire system around it. Well, my guest started out as an aerospace engineer. Yeah, rockets and jets and all that kind of good stuff. But then he found this weird overlooked corner of real estate called tax liens and deeds and tax sales and all that kind of good stuff. Well, fast forward, he's raised tens of millions of dollars, built multiple companies, and created platforms that are now powering investors all over the country. Today, he runs Tax Sale Resources, the go-to data and tech platform for tax lien investors. And he's also behind Mount North Capital, a fund that helps distressed real estate investors get access to capital. So if you've ever wondered how to raise serious money, manage risk with data, and find opportunities most people don't even know exist, you're going to absolutely love this conversation on today's podcast. In just a moment, you're going to meet my special guest, Brian Seidensticker, right after this. Welcome to the show, Brian. I'm so excited to have you today.
Well, thanks for having me, Jay. I'm excited to be here.
Absolutely. Well, Brian, most, as you know, investors to struggle even their first $100,000. For goodness sakes, you've raised $35 million. So here's my first question. What were the biggest shifts, mindset, et cetera, that allowed you to think and act at that scale?
Well, I think I've never really thought about from that perspective, Jay, but I think probably the biggest thing is maybe thinking a little bigger than most people do initially. And I think the biggest I guess reason behind that, right, is when you're raising significant capital, if you're going to raise it, from a private perspective, each investor that you work with is going to be a series of conversations, and some are going to be many conversations, some might be a couple, but it's going to be a series of conversations. And that obviously takes up time. And the one thing that is limited by all of us, right, on Earth right now is there's only so much time in a day. You can't make a 24-day into a 26-hour day. We all need to still sleep, and so making sure that you align your goals with the level of investor and your minimum capital placement, et cetera, is very key to making sure you can hit your goals. Because if you go in with the mindset of, I'll take investors at $1 or $10. Yeah, you can get a lot of investors, but it's going to take a lot of conversations to get any traction on that front.
Yeah, I learned the hard way that when I first started raising capital for real estate, my initial mindset was, well, if they want to invest, I'll let them invest. And so the 10,000, the 20,000, the 25,000. And what I quickly discovered is I got to pay my real estate attorney the same amount of money to close 25,000 or 2,500 as I do $250,000. So I quickly discovered, I need to figure out exactly really what is that minimum amount that I want to allow a private lender investor to come in and loan to me, because after all, that's one of the first questions they're going to ask, right? Is, well, what's the minimum I can start with? Because here's a writer downer. They all have more than they tell you. Has that been your, hey, how often, Brian, have you had a new investor or private lender come in and put money with you, and then shortly down the road, they say, well, hey, I've got some more I'd like to invest.
Right. Oh, yeah. I'd say not everybody, but darn close to everybody, right? I think it's, rarely does somebody put 100% of their capital into one investment or everything that they have available at the time. A lot of things happen, right? I think it's I might give you a portion to see how it goes, right? And then, another investment came due. I want to put it in a different location. So do you have some bandwidth? So it's very rarely is it a one and done, placement. It's usually a trickle effect, right?
Yeah.
Which is great depending on the type of investment that you're offering.
One phrase you said just a second ago was, you said normally it's a series of conversations with a new potential private lender or investor. And that's been my experience for sure. And so the takeaway on that is many, many times having a new private lender or investor come on with you into your business. It's so important from my experience to be planting seeds all the time, mentioning what you do, how somebody says, hey, Jay, what in the world do you do? Well, I pay a lot of money to my private investors for my real estate deals, and we make, lucrative opportunities for everybody. So how do you even answer the question, what do you do? And that's what I meant by planting seeds. And, I'm interested in finding out from you, Brian. I have a lot of my private lenders and investors that I mentioned it to them, and it might be a year, 2 years, 3 years down the road before they come back around and they say, hey, Jay, you were talking about that private money thing. Can you tell me more about it? And then I've got new private lenders that come on with me in less than 30 days. Has that been your experience as well?
Yes, right. I think it's, like you said, to plant the seeds right now. That's I'll say a skill or a habit that I've learned over time, where, that question of what do you do? And now my typical answer is, I run a real estate fund, right? And that's kind of that planting of the seed, and that can run a lot of different directions depending on the receiver of that, information or that seed of, well, tell me more about what do you do? Oh, you run a fund, what kind of investment do you offer? Right. And so it's, learning that skill, or keep being cognizant and planting that seed consistently has definitely been a skill set that has evolved over time, because there's folks that, randomly, I was presenting on a stage, this would be about a year ago, randomly presenting on a stage and about the fund, and the gal had heard that I was from Montana. She came up and introduced herself, and lo and behold, we actually knew people in Southwest Montana, little town of Dillon, which is very uncommon. But that was, she also was looking for a place to place capital. But our conversation, almost 95% of our conversations have nothing to do with the fund itself. It was really more about the people and the places that we knew in common. So I guess those little things that come out, down the road, right, which is key, overall. Again, you can't set the expectations that, the conversation that I have today is the only opportunity to raise capital. It's planting those seeds and watching those seeds grow into something fruitful down the road.
Brian, I've had hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of guests on the show. I love talking about how do you introduce yourself? How do you let people know that you give high rates of return safely and securely to your investors and your private lenders. But I've never had until right here on this show, you yourself, Brian Seidensticker, answer the question of what do you do? I run a real estate fund. Now, I'll tell you what I love about that answer. Number one, it's short. It's to the point. The person that asks you that question, what do you do? Listen, folks, if you are listening to this podcast, you want to write this down. The person that asks you the question, what do you do? And you answer the question, I run a real estate fund. It's short. They probably 99.99999% in their life have never had anyone tell them that answer. I run a real estate fund. And thirdly, naturally, they want to know what in the world is that? What is a real estate fund? Because most people don't even know what a real estate fund is. And that's a brilliant answer, Brian. That has got to have paid you millions in returns just by answering the question, what do you do with, I run a real estate fund.
Yeah, well, it certainly is sparked conversations way better than previously. Before I started Mountain of Capital, it was I run a distressed real estate investing software. People might have curiosity, but most people are like, what? Let's talk about something else, right? So it is definitely, tell me a bit more about that. The fund, the real estate. I think it's a good combination of words that spark a lot of interest, and naturally, right, of folks that are looking to. I'll take a step back, right? And you probably believe this too, Jay. Like the best advertising out there is still word of mouth, right? And there is, I think it's just a natural human trait of if I meet somebody that does something, I'm going to give them more validity in my mind that they are doing something right, whether they are or not, right? But if I can see and feel this person in real life, that is better than something that's online or an ad, right? And so, whether or not they were looking to place capital or not, right? If that was even an inkling in the back of their mind, right? Is like immediately, this is somebody that does this, right? Can I talk to you more about it? It brings that to the surface. And I can't say I went into coming up with that answer with the intent of doing that. It just seems to have sparked that response. So I guess even a blind squirrel gets a nut every once in a while, right?
Well, Brian, you are not a blind squirrel. I will assure you that. So I'm going to ask my executive producer of my podcast right here live on the show, make sure that is in the show notes. Make sure that's in the show notes and give Brian Seidensticker the quote, the credit. Here's how you answer the question. What do you do to attract new investors without chasing, begging, selling, or persuading? You just answer the question, I run a real estate fund, and shut up.
Yeah, and answer questions from there. Exactly.
Just let the mic drop. Just let the mic drop, right? Let the mic drop right after you say, I run a real estate fund. And you know what? People, you will have fun. You will have fun. Even if you don't run a fund yet, you're getting ready to raise private money, right? So, Brian, there's all kinds of classes of real estate. There's that people can use private money for. There's self-storage. There's, like in my world, single family houses. There's multifamily. There's other commercial. There's land, all kinds of real estate. And now here you are in this world of tax sales. How did you get interested in tax sales? And why tax sales? This is a three-part question. If you forget one of them, I'll remind you. So how did you get started in this world of tax sales, tax liens, tax deeds? And by the way, let everybody know what's the difference between tax liens and tax deeds and all that stuff. How did you get in it? Why did you stay in it versus other classes? And three, How do you use private money for those type of deals? Like in my world, I give my private lenders a promissory because it's single family houses, right?
Mhm.
They get a promissory note, they get a deed of trust or a mortgage. As with funds, that's different. So how did you get in it? Why are you staying in it? What's the difference between those different pieces? And how do you structure it with private money?
You might have to remind me on some of those, Jay. But yeah, as far as getting into it, I did not grow up with aspirations of becoming a tax sale investor or expert or whatever you call it. It was really more. I was introduced on the wrong side of a tax lien. I was doing a traditional fix and flip thing on the side, with a few properties. This is why while I was still in my my previous life as an aerospace engineer. And in 2007 ended up upside down, right, as values were going down. And this was in a property in Montana. And then oddly, with the way this tax liens work, I'll talk about the difference here shortly, but the way tax lien sales work in Montana is every prospective buyer of that tax lien. So every investor that wants to buy that tax lien has to send a certified letter to the property owner. And so I got all these certified letters from various investors, roughly with the same verbiage, but all of them basically stating you could lose your real estate if you don't pay your taxes, etc. And probably because of it, I didn't realize this at the time. It wasn't until probably the fifth time I was asked that question that finally epiphany light went off in my head. Is like, you know what? If I had gotten one letter from the county, like most states, I don't know that I would have thought twice about it. But the fact that I got so many from private institutions, investors, made me investigate what this whole delinquent tax lien, thing is, and realize, there's a industry, well, I'll say small compared to the, greater real estate industry in the U.S., but still $4 to $5 billion on an annual basis that I'd never heard of. Most people have never heard of, and got me pointed in that direction. Right. And this is me as an engineer, by trade. I like big, juicy problems. I like something new. And so I, recognized, all right, maybe real estate in the fix and flip realm that I was pursuing at the time wasn't the best timing in the world, entering into the Great Recession. And so found this whole tax lien thing and basically redirected and pointed in that direction and raised some funds to go buy tax liens in a couple of states. That's really how I got introduced to the space. Now,
now let me get a little clarity on that story. Why were you receiving the letters?
Well, we were basically because we had taxes that were due on the property that we were fixing and flipping at the time.
Okay.
So we were behind in our taxes, and the way that Montana statutes govern is before the county sells a lien, right? And this will kind of help when I talk about the difference between tax lien and tax deed. So the county wants to balance the budget, they sell a lien, and then the buyer of that lien, at least in Montana, before they purchase it, have to send a certified letter to the property owner. And so that's where I got to be the recipient as the owner of the property. I was the recipient of all of those certified letters from prospective buyers. So
okay.
Again, I really on the wrong side of a tax lien is how I got introduced to it.
I got you.
Now, as far as the difference between the two, I guess the short description would be a tax lien I like to compare it to a micro mortgage, right? It's a interest in the property with enforceability behind it, but you don't own the property if you buy a tax lien or a tax certificate. There's different terminology I'm going to call them tax liens. And so investors are buying these tax liens, but they are not owning the property. They are essentially lending some money to the government, and in exchange for that, they get a lien on the property. And so if the property ever sells, or what more likely or most often happens, the property owner does pay their taxes with penalties and interest, etc., then that penalties and interest and principal goes back to the investor. The county's happy, the investor's happy, the homeowner goes on their merry way. Now, what can happen if the property owner continues to not pay their property taxes, at some point, the lien holder can start a foreclosure of the property, a tax sale foreclosure. That culminates, just like a mortgage foreclosure, culminates in the resale of the property. And that sale of the property is what I call a tax deed, right? Then now, tax deed investors, right? You're buying the real estate, right? And I would say tax deed investors are no different than any other real estate investors. They just understand this avenue of acquiring the real estate, which is a very specialized way of acquiring that real estate. And that's the difference between a tax lien, which is the interest in the property, and the tax deed, which is buying the property itself.
So clarification, a real estate investor invests in a tax lien, and if the owner of the property does not pay their taxes, well, they do. They pay their taxes, and the interest, it now goes back to the real estate investor, and everybody goes on their merry way.
Right.
But if they don't, then the investor can then foreclose at whatever period of time as stipulated by state law, whatever.
State statutes, yep.
They can then foreclose, and if the taxes are not paid, investor paid off, then the investor gets the property. Now that's a tax deed, right?
Well, yes, but I guess the only change to that would be we're going to get down some rabbit holes here. We can go as deep as you want, but there's a recent Supreme Court case called Tyler versus Hennepin that really plugged the hole of the lien holder becoming the owner of the deed, right? Basically what it stipulated is there's got to be a sale of the property, like an auction. So there ends up being a second auction. And so the lien holder forecloses, that results in a sale of the property. The property gets sold to a third party. That third party is the tax deed investor, right? The lien investor gets made whole from the proceeds of that auction, but the lien holder does not become the owner of the property at the end of the day. It's a third party that does
right.
so.
So really, when you talk about tax liens and tax deeds, what you're saying is that's two different lanes or opportunities that a real estate investor can get involved. They can either invest in the tax lien, or they can invest in get a tax deed by bidding at an auction like you would a foreclosure auction.
Exactly.
There you go.
Lien investors are note investors, right? For anybody that has bought mortgages, right, deed of trusts, right, that sort of thing. That is, tax liens fall into that category. It's a real estate security, versus tax deeds it's real estate investing, right? Not unlike buying any other type of real estate, just a different type of sale.
Perfect. Well, I just wanted to clarify that for the sake of our audience, because that those phrases are thrown around all the time. Tax liens, tax deeds. Okay, what's the difference? How do you invest in that one? Like you said, a tax lien, you're actually investing in the note, right? Tax deed, that's like a foreclosure on a property, but instead of I think you called it a minute ago, a teeny mortgage, a small mortgage.
I compare it to a micro mortgage because there's so many similarities between a mortgage and a tax lien. Exactly.
All right. So now we know how you got involved. You got involved on the other side of it,
the wrong side,
because you're rehabbing a property, and now here comes the tax lien or tax sale. And and we know the difference, but what is it about this avenue of real estate investing that you like better than single family, self-storage? I mean, why this lane versus multifamily or whatever?
Well, I think it's not really a wholly different, right? Quite frankly, tax deeds, right, is an avenue that you can acquire all of those different types of assets. And through our fund, right, and we work with local partners. Some buy vacant land, some specialize in single family homes. We do have worked with a couple folks that look for commercial and have purchased and funded a couple commercial acquisitions as well. There's some asset classes we don't touch right now, industrial, farmland, that type of thing. We just don't have the right underwriting process. But they're not mutually exclusive, right? I think you look at tax deed is just another way of acquiring those things. Now it's different because you're not buying a cash flowing single family rental, right? You're buying typically a very distressed asset that does need a lot of work. And so, but I kind of use, if anybody's watched HGTV shows, Fix and Flip, all of those, and they do a great job of picking the worst properties when you walk in, and it's, a hoarder's nightmare, and there's stuff everywhere. And, I guarantee a large percentage of those are tax sale properties. So you can kind of imagine the type of real estate you're buying. Right. And so I'm saying that to say it's not for everybody. Right. But if you want to acquire a piece of commercial real estate at a discount and you want to put the effort into making it into a cash flowing commercial real estate, or multifamily do the same, or single family do the same, then tax deeds can be an avenue. And that's really, I just want to clarify that. The thing that probably appealed to me the most initially and continues to appeal to me is just how much I learn continuously on a day-to-day basis, right? It's the learning, right? And then the daily satisfaction of seeing something actually make progress, right? Which is not that different from any real estate, right? When you walk in at the end of the day, or you get done painting the wall or swinging a hammer, you can actually see the progress that you made at the end of the day. So that, on top of the continuous learning, like being an engineer mentally and by trade, is like that scratches all those itches for me and has kept me engaged for the last 18 years, and who knows how much longer. But it's been a fun ride.
Brian, you've built this tech platform, and I'm the furthest thing in the world from tech, if you know what I mean. But I need it. I mean, I got to have my data, right? Even if I'm not analyzing, I got somebody else analyze. But you've built this tech platform around tax liens and deeds. You've got the fund, right?
Mm-hmm.
So let's talk about the tech platform. What is it? How does it work? What's it do? How has having better data actually helped you raise more capital, if that's even a connection?
Well, I'd say having better data is key in our success, right? Has it been a direct result, or has it played a direct role in raising more capital? Maybe. I don't know how to make that direct connection, but I'm sure it's been a benefit or something that people go, that's pretty cool. But really, we weren't a fund. We shifted from a fund initially. I'll call it a fund, but it really wasn't. It was friends and family money at a small scale, buying liens in Wyoming and Montana. It wasn't enough to consider it even a full-time job. And that shifted pretty quickly to software, and we got out of buying liens for almost a decade before coming back to the fund model. But it really came about of I had a friend I met at a conference who was looking at what we were doing, and we built this platform as an internal tool for us to just know when and where these auctions are taking place and the properties that we're involved in. I mean, it wasn't like crazy rocket science stuff. It was answering those basic questions because nothing out there publicly was available to do the simple things. So all the investors at the time had an in-house team of people, and they were all individually calling all of these counties and having these conversations. And that friend basically suggested, hey, why don't you take this database, this website that I built for internal purposes, and make it available to the public, and maybe you'll make a little bit and help pay your overhead. And that's what we did. That's really how Tax Sale Resources came about, is as a platform to track, roughly 9,000 auctions a year, a couple million properties that go to auction, and about $8 to $9 billion in tax liens and deeds that get sold on an annual basis. And that's what we did for 10 years, is provide that information to third party, both tax lien investors and tax deed investors. The really cool part came about is when we started tracking the results from those auctions, because not only did we have the answer of what's going to auction, but we knew where you can get the better deals at auctions, right? Because not every auction is equal and not every property is equal. And so we spent several years putting together, now that the term is AI, you hear all over, but it's, AI is just a complex algorithm that crunches a lot of data and says, hey, these are the ones that you should, look at buying because you're likely going to get a better deal on those. And that's really the start of creating Mountain North Capital, the fund, was having access to that data so that we knew which properties to buy at a discount, at a better discount, and which auctions to avoid, because we knew you weren't going to get any discount at those auctions. And that's really where, Tax Sale Resources as a data analytics provider is a key component of our success, because it's what points us, Mountain North Capital, in the right direction and buying the properties that we buy. But until we put together the fund and actually executed on that, there really wasn't any value in that information. And that's really, what we started in 2020 was initially trying to convince a bank, right, to do what we're doing. We just wanted to really provide a funding mechanism to our customers, right, the users of our software platform, trying to create the mentality of if investors use our platform more, obviously we make more money, and they'll use our platform more if they have access to capital. And so please, bank, right, that we were trying to work with, could you figure out how to lend on tax deeds? And that's something that still doesn't really exist today, to our knowledge, is you can't get bank financing on tax deeds. That is a big nuance to this type of asset class.
So I'm sorry, go ahead.
No,
I'm sorry.
Go for it. That was long. I'm really not good at short answers, Jay, if you haven't noticed, but that's how we got introduced into the
No. I like that. So let's make sure all of our listeners are understanding. So you really have two services that you provide to real estate investors. You have the fund, right?
Right.
That real estate investors can borrow money from to invest in tax liens, tax deeds, et cetera, right?
Yeah, nuances. I guess technically we're not a lender, right? So we don't actually borrow. We work with investors on a profit share basis, but it is access to capital to buy tax deeds. You're exactly right on that front.
Okay, so you got the fund; they can access capital, and then you partner with them, share partnerships, collaborate, et cetera. And then the other company you have in service is this company called Tax Sale Resources. So
Exactly.
let's really drill down on that. So first of all, does crystallize one more time what service and information. So let's say, so here I am in Eastern North Carolina, and I want to start investing in, tax liens, et cetera.
Mm-hmm.
And I've heard about Brian and this amazing company, Tax Sale Resources. How would I go about learning what services Tax Sale Resources provides?
So I like to say, once you know what you're doing, it's all the tools that you need to be successful. What we are not is probably the better or easier way to answer is we're not a coach and we're not a mentor. We're not an educator, right, of how to invest in tax sales. And so I say that because that's not our service. We have a ton of free information. That's what part of the resources is. We have a blog, we have a podcast. I interview attorneys that support tax sale investors in many states. And in my opinion, obviously I'm biased here, Jay, but I think it's probably the best source of information, good, legit information on tax sales in one place that you can find. But we're not going to be the guide through all of that information. And at the end of the day, you get a certificate and say you're ready to go. And we're not going to
you're not going to get on the phone. You're not going to get on the phone with a client and say, yeah, you ought to invest in that one.
Right. That's definitely not what we do. Now, what we do is I hopefully don't ever get a cease letter for this, but I like to say, because most people are familiar with Zillow, right? I like to say the platform itself is a Zillow for tax sale properties. And so think of it as a mapping platform that allows you to go find everything that is up for sale today, right, 4 weeks from now, nationwide. And that varies throughout the year because states have their sales at certain times of the year. And so you can't go in North Carolina and find something at all times. You can't go in Alabama at all times, right? But throughout the year, the nation has sales and we cover every auction that occurs. And so finding which auctions to attend, which properties to buy, and the information associated with those properties to make that buying decision is all in that platform. And so it's the tools that you need to make all of those decisions and be successful in the space once you have an idea of what you're doing.
And you just answered my next question. And then I want you to let everybody know how to get in contact with you and Tax Sale Resources and all that kind of good stuff. So it sounds like Tax Sale Resources services the entire nation.
We do. There's a couple states that don't have auctions, but outside of that, we do track 9,000 plus auctions, almost 2 million of properties, and just over $8 to $9 billion of transactions annually in the space, all through the platform.
That's amazing. Brian, please share with everybody, how do they find out more about Tax Sale Resources? How do they get in contact with you and the team and learn about signing up with you?
Well, Tax Sale Resources is pretty straightforward. You can just go to taxsaleresources.com. So if you're interested on the software side, go there. If you're interested in the capital side, which is really on either investing in the fund or actually wanting to utilize the funds, from the fund, right, and buying these assets, then you can go to mountainnorthcapital.com. And either one of those avenues will point you in the right direction and get you in touch with our team.
Okay, well, that's important to note there. Your fund, mountainnorthcapital.com. Of course, all this will be in the show notes. If you're looking to invest in a fund to get a nice return and be totally passive, Brian's got that opportunity for you in mountainnorthcapital.com. In addition to that, if you want to get access to capital for investing in tax liens, then Mount North Capital is a resource for that. And then in addition to that, www.taxsalesresources.com. If you're interested in getting data in your area, wherever you want to invest in tax liens, Brian and his team's got that available, taxsalesresources.com, for you to take advantage of that and get the data. Brian, thank you so much for joining me on the show today. I really appreciate it. This was amazing. God bless you.
Well, Jay, I greatly appreciate you having me. Had fun.
Thank you.
Good luck, everybody.
All right. And there you have it, another amazing episode here on Raising Private Money. And if you would love for me to come back and have more amazing guests like Brian today, then all you got to do is share this episode with just one person. Share this episode with just one person that you believe that this would make a difference in their life. And of course, give me a thumbs up, like, share, subscribe. If you're watching on YouTube, be sure and subscribe and click that bell so you don't miss out on any other episodes. Looking forward to seeing you right here on the next episode of Raising Private Money with Jay Conner.
Are you feeling inspired by the knowledge you gained in this episode? Then head over to jconner.com/moneyguide. That's jconner.com/moneyguide. And download your free guide that shares 7 reasons why private money will skyrocket your real estate investing business right now. Again, that's jconner.com/moneyguide to get your free guide. We'll see you next time on Raising Private Money with Jay Conner.